Latest news from the world of radio every Sunday morning at 10:30 on the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal and online at ckut.ca.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, June the 8th, 2025. We thank you for joining us here on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. My name's Sheldon. I'm here with Jill, and we have our usual 30 minutes of news and information from the world of radio, things going on here in the city of Montreal, and things around the world on your radio dial. We will get things going right away on this show with a story, Gilles, that you found in the local La Presse newspaper in Montreal.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks in a row, I think, that we're talking about 98.5 for different reasons. Now we're talking about the 98.5 CHMP for their ratings. They're kind of in a little panic mode because there's been some changes on 98.5. One of the big names, Paul Arcand, left last year, and what happened is they've changed the programs a little bit, and they put in his place on the morning show Patrick Lagacé. We've got the first real ratings that show that 98.5 is losing some ground, and who's winning? Well, it's ICI Première, the Radio-Canada French language 95.1. The ICI Première, Radio-Canada, has got 19.3% shares of the market, while 98.5 went from a market share that was 23.7 down to 19.1, which is kind of a big decline. So they do say that Paul Arcand, since he left 98.5, the number of people listening in the morning show, Paul Arcand last year had 89,300 listeners per minute on average, and that is now down to 58,100 listeners per minute for the new show, which is Patrick Lagacé, Lagacé le matin. Radio-Canada, ICI Première, Patrick Masbourian has got 63,700 listeners per minute on average, and so they are number one in the morning. They're saying that, 98.5 says, well, we understand it's owned by Cogeco Media. We understand that there's, changes. We have, some personalities, and Paul Arcand is gone. And they're saying that, there's adjustments going on there. And in a related note, we, of course, talked about it many months ago where 99.5 was starting a whole new talk radio and that they want to be, competition. Well, they're not much competition because 99.5 Cube Radio has a 3.3% market share only. So it's really not gaining anything. It's still very, very far from the big two, which is, 98.5 CHMP and ICI Première, Radio-Canada 95.1.
Yeah, those are two very popular stations, but now neck and neck. It'll be interesting to see, one of them is going to want to try to pull away from the other one, and we'll see who comes through with that. But it's definitely a two-horse race when it comes down to news and information on the French language side. I'm wondering if the federal election had any impact on the two stations. That was the big story, obviously, going on over the last couple months in our area. So whether that might have had something to do with it, but we were talking before the show. Personality radio is really the key. A lot of people tune to a station not just for the content, but also who's there presenting it and who's hosting the shows. So when you lose a big name that's been around for a long time and bring someone new in, either the people just, go with the flow and stay with that new person, or they say, I don't like this so much. I'm going to go see what else is out there.
What I would be a little worried on 98.5 is that if you take the top 10 radio shows on the FM band, 9 out of 10 are from ICI Première, Radio-Canada. Only one from 98.5 makes the top 10. And it's a second spot with Lagacé le matin.
Interesting. Something to keep a watch on for sure.
Yep.
We're going to move out to Winnipeg, where, well, the big story out in Winnipeg right now, of course, in the prairies, is the forest fires that are going on. And if any of our listeners are out there, we hope you're safe and sound wherever you might be. But it's pretty devastating. But we have a good news story coming out of Winnipeg. This comes from Conrad Sweatman of the Winnipeg Free Presse. The headline is Radio Host Gains Wide Audience Among Incarcerated, in part by not being judgmental. For those of us with Spotify and internet access, it's easy to take for granted that radio request shows are all but obsolete. Most have already dropped from the dial. But there are vast expanses of northern Canada where internet access remains patchy, and old-fangled AM/FM radio is still the go-to audio source for news and entertainment. No surprise, here we find programs such as Native Communications Incorporated in Manitoba and CKLB in the Northwest Territories offering local listeners call-in and request-based programming. Stephanie Kersey, a Winnipeg-based radio DJ and personal support worker with a professional background in addictions and homelessness, uses her CKUW 95.9 FM program, Res Vibe Connections, which runs from 4 to 6 p.m. Fridays, to take song cues from an even more isolated population, the incarcerated. The show's for everyone, and I do get callers from all cultures and levels of society, but right now, the jails are the main focus, and people are being gracious enough to accept that, she says. And just talking to inmates a few minutes, showing compassion, gets them excited and brightens their light. Kersey says calls are now coming in from most of Manitoba's correctional centers since the show's picked up steam in the past few months. Inmates share a quick, friendly chat while making their song request, often swapping a few jokes or words of encouragement. At first I was wondering, are the people listening? Can they hear me, she says. I was just building dialogue with them. Now they're calling in like crazy. Kersey, who is of mixed Indigenous and Black ancestry, says that for all the talk of reconciliation and inclusion today, those values often vanish where those with criminal records are concerned. No one actually wants to talk to them, she says. They're pretty much excommunicated from society. The DJ, who's 43 and has 2 children, has spent her life thinking about what it means to live on the social outskirts. As a Black and Indigenous woman, she's often felt the usual cultural categories don't fully include her and her family. The government said that we, the Kersey clan, are Métis, but we're not Métis, she says. Kersey grew up in Amherstburg, Ontario, where her father was a Black Panther and legal activist whose causes included fighting to ensure that youth were not charged as adults. In this crucible, a future social advocate was forged. My father fought inside and outside the system with formal education to back him up, and so did many of our elders and all of our family members. And we're now at a pivotal moment in time where we, the next generation, have had the privilege to go to school, get the diplomas, be in these higher positions, so we can decolonize the system from the inside out. As a personal support worker, Kersey said she's been drawn to helping those struggling with homelessness and addictions. To do effective work in this field demands you to leave harsh judgments and condescension behind, and that's also how she approaches Res Vibe Connections. The people aren't perfect, and there's levels to it, she says. But brother, let's leave your labels at the door. Kersey believes the connection and informal network she's building with callers could help support people once they're released. A lot of them are calling me after they get out, saying, I just got out. I'm so excited. I'm like, cool, holler at me. We can collaborate, she says. I have a lot of resources and programs I can direct you to, so you won't fall through the cracks. She's interested to see how far this might develop, but doesn't want to be heavy-handed either. For her, the starting point has to be something uplifting like music. Music is the baseline, it's the foundation, it's the platform for us all to come together, she says. It's the frequency that resonates through us all, that connects all of our spirits. So this is some good work being done by a lady on the radio, reaching out to people that more or less have been rejected or forgotten or ignored along the way for whatever reasons. So nice to see a segment of the community that's getting some attention like this and using good old radio to do it.
Yeah, this is nice because, we talk about it sometimes that sometimes a simple gesture, a simple thing of reaching out, and in this case, reaching out with radio, can change someone's lives forever. So this is important.
I know here at CKUT years ago when my brother was doing a bluegrass and country music show on the station, he actually received a lot of calls from prisoners in the correctional system here in Quebec who were listening to the program. And similar to this, they wanted to hear a song that meant something to them. They were sitting, enjoying listening to the radio. You got a lot of free time when you're locked up somewhere, and sometimes you just need something to get your boost your morale a little bit. And listening to the radio was doing it for them. So good to have a story like this.
So what's happening with our son? Well, if you were listening to the radio this week, I think the general comment that I was reading everywhere on the different groups was, is it me? Is my radio broken, or I'm not getting anything? And that was a big part of the week. There was a N-class solar flare that was a very long duration flare, lasted more than 3 hours. And when it reached the Earth this week, it created severe geomagnetic storms. So conditions were really kind of crappy on the bands. The sunspots that are left right now are very quiet. And so maybe for the week ahead, the quiet conditions will apply, and we'll have our radios back with the signals that we want to hear. In terms of propagation, something very interesting this week. It's time for what we call sporadic E-skip openings, which are very intense ionized clouds of patches of ionosphere that can propagate signals very high. It opens the 6-meter band, 50 megahertz, but in my case, it opened up the FM broadcast band. It opened it up quite high too, and even around the CKUT frequency, which is 90.3, I was at just below 90.1. Got a station in Georgia. Further down, 88.9 or 8, I got a station out of Kansas City. And there were several channels that were actually multiple stations at the same time that were just getting back and forth and exchanging. And it was like very interesting, going from country music for 10 seconds to an NPR talk show to some religious broadcaster. It was just mind-boggling trying to find out what was there. And man, this was a lot of fun. It lasted several hours. I know our friend Janice that was once on this show at one point. She was in her car doing some DXing. She sent me a list of listening for about 2 hours, and tons of stations that she got from all over the place, from Florida, Georgia, Missouri, and many other states. It was just amazing opening. Our sunspot number, 92. Our solar flux, 134. And hopefully conditions can stay quiet. And you know what? Keep a lookout and listen to the FM broadcast band. You never know what can happen. It's this time of year is actually the time for sporadic E-skip in the Northern Hemisphere, June, July. So take a listen. You never know. And between those stations that you hear normally, where there's just static, you might hear some station from far away. And the only way that you can witness all of this is to turn on a radio and listen.
This is Janice of Dorval. The International Radio Report presents 30 minutes of news, information, and commentary on developments in the world of radio every Sunday morning at 10:30 on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal and online at ckut.ca.
So in our next story, Hurricanes Helene and Milton exposed need to protect AM radio. This is by guest columnist Joe Myers from The Recorder via Radio World. Although it's been months since Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton battered Florida, the scars remain. Power lines still lie in tangled piles in some neighborhoods. flood-damaged homes stand gutted and waiting on insurance payouts and other backlogs. And yet, although 8 months have come and went, some automakers still can't find it in them to put Floridians' public safety before their own profits. Despite pleas and warnings from Florida's public safety, community, and elected officials on the local, state, and federal levels, a growing number of automakers have begun removing AM radios from new model vehicles. AM radio is not just a popular entertainment platform. Most importantly, it serves as the backbone of our nation's public warning systems. Because AM signals reach great distances and rarely go dark during disasters, unlike other forms of communications that often become inaccessible in emergencies, it is public safety officials' fail-safe method to warn the public of impending danger and keep the population safe and informed. This was absolutely the case for many Floridians during Helene and Milton, which left more than 6 million people without power and many without cell phone and internet service. AM radio was the only way many Floridians got life-saving updates. Where to evacuate, where to find food and water, which roads were closed, and how to reach emergency shelters. Helene and Milton weren't the first times Floridians relied upon AM radio as a critical public safety tool. In 2022, one Florida-based emergency management official said that during Hurricane Irma, he and many of his Florida neighbors got their storm updates exclusively from their radios. With their cell phone and internet connections out, it was local AM radio channels that directed them where to go to obtain fresh food and water and overnight areas of safety. Yet, many automakers are ignoring the public safety experts as they continue to produce vehicles without AM radios. Representative Gus Bilirakis, Republican Florida, recently introduced the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act. His bill requires all automobiles bought and sold in the U.S. to include access to AM radio signals. Bilirakis stated that he introduced this bill out of the recognition that each hurricane season, Floridians rely upon the ability to gain access to information needed to make timely and potentially life-saving decisions. Legislation has since amassed broad bipartisan support among Florida politicos, including Senators Rick Scott and Ashley Moody and Congress as a whole. Florida first responders on the ground have also made it clear that it was a true lifeline that saved lives. That is why many of them sent their own letters to congressional leadership pushing the same bill. The Major Cities Chiefs Association, representing the police departments in all of Florida's largest cities, has also joined the call, urging Congress to act before another Helene or Milton-level disaster strikes again. These same car companies want Washington to bankroll their EVs and manufacturing plants, but when public safety leaders ask them to keep a highly important piece of our public safety infrastructure in the dashboard to save lives during disasters, they shrug. It's disgraceful, and Congress should put a stop to it. Florida's elected officials are leading the way in protecting public safety, and here's hoping they can get the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act to President Trump's desk. With Helene and Milton still fresh in everyone's mind, now has never been a better time. So Joe Myers is the former director of the Florida Division of Emergency Management. So there you go. You got the automakers that are totally deaf to what would be important to have in a car, an AM-capable radio, to try to save money, of course. And yet, on the other side, you've got all of these people that, were in disaster areas. It is something that is important. AM radio, we say it all the time, goes long distances. This is what's the important part. You might think, oh, well, what about FM? Yeah, but FM's line of sight. You might hear an FM station from a local area, But if you're far away, or if your FM station or the ones that you had around might not be on, AM radio stations from hundreds to thousands of miles away might have disaster relief information for you that could be broadcast and heard. Where you got no power, you got no cell phone, usually your car will still work. You'll just turn on the radio and listen to what's out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of, people talk about FM, and the problem with FM, there's a couple of problems. The antennas are much smaller. They're often on top of buildings. It's very easy to get them knocked over or whatever. It's got to be something pretty major to take out an AM transmitter site with its antennas. So they do tend to stay on during some of these disasters. The other thing is a lot of FM stations, even if they are on, they're automated in many cases. And there's actually maybe just a technician there monitoring the station. So getting any news, live people on the air is very limited in some cases when it comes to FM. So this is really why they're pushing so heavy on the AM radios. Our next story comes from Nick Langan at Radio World. White House seeks to rescind $1.1 billion for NPR and PBS and foreign aid. President Trump has formally asked Congress to rescind the $1.1 billion previously approved for National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting System and international aid programs. According to CBS News, the full rescission package seeks to cancel $9.4 billion in previously appropriated funds, aiming to make permanent some of the Department of Government Efficiency's recent spending reductions. It primarily targets cuts to foreign assistance and major public broadcasting entities. The president ordered the federal government to stop funding NPR and PBS in an executive order on May the 2nd. In a memo to staff obtained by Ben Mullen of the New York Times, NPR's CEO Catherine Marr said Tuesday that if funding already approved by Congress is rescinded, the effect would be immediate. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting will not have funds to distribute to stations by autumn of this year. The most devastating impact would be to the local public media stations that rely on these funds to operate. Patricia Harrison, President and CEO of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, said in a statement Tuesday afternoon that federal funding for the public broadcasting system is irreplaceable. The Office of Management and Budget's formal request initiates the process that gives Congress 45 days to respond. First, the proposal is reviewed by relevant committees, then it may be brought to a vote by the full House and Senate. So I'm sure all of the PBS stations and the NPR stations on the radio are holding their breath right now. They're going to run out of funds eventually, and if the money that's been allocated to them is not passed along and not approved, some of these stations are going to have a very, very difficult time staying on the air.
I think if we have to put it in a way, I think whatever your beliefs, whatever you think, in terms of political opinions, freedom of speech means you keep the funding for everybody so that everybody has a voice.
Yeah, you need alternative radio as well, and that's what NPR is really. It's something different. I think in many cases, they don't have large audiences. And I think people who don't listen to them read stories that, we can save $1.1 billion here. I don't listen to those stations, so they can't be very good. And, so what if we lose them? It's the people who know and the people who do use them that realize how much different they are, how important they are, offering alternate viewpoints in some cases, in many cases offering a balanced reporting. And, it seems that there are certain people out there that don't want balanced reporting. They want one side of it reported and they don't want to hear the other. So these stations are caught in limbo and just waiting it out right now to see what happens.
And before you have an opinion of should we remove the funding, how about sitting down and listening to NPR for a couple of hours just to see what it looks like, what it sounds like?
Exactly.
So now we've got some amateur radio DXPEDITIONS and special events.
I have a few things for you to check out if you're on the ham bands, either as a listener or as a ham radio operator. The country of Madagascar, prefix 5 Romeo. Gianpi, who's an Italian IK1TTD, is operating as 5 Romeo 8 Tango Delta until June the 11th. He is operating, they call it holiday style. I guess it's an Italian that's visiting Madagascar. And he's operating from a place called Nosy Bay and Tsarabanjina Island in Madagascar, using a vertical antenna. So look for him across the HF amateur radio bands.
We've got the prefix Golf Juliet in Jersey. This is in the UK area. There's the NBDX team that will be active as Mike Juliet / Oscar Papa 2 Delta between June 6th and 13th. A large team with 13 operators from Radioclub Grimbergen and others will be QRV from 160 to 4 meters, as in Europe 4 meters is a band, using CW, SSB, FT8. They'll also be on QO100, which is a amateur satellite, and DATV also. The team will use the call sign, like I said, Mike Juliet / Oscar Papa 2 Delta for all contacts from the residents.
And we have a big contest coming up next weekend as well. It's the American Radio Relay League's June VHF Contest. It's running 1800 Zulu June 14th, all the way through 0259 Zulu June the 16th. The contest objective is for amateurs in the U.S. and Canada and their possessions to work as many amateur stations in as many different 2 degree by 1 degree Maidenhead grid squares as possible, using authorized frequencies above 50 megahertz. Stations outside the U.S. and Canada and their possessions may only work stations in the U.S. and its possessions and Canada. So it's all modes, but in everything 50 megs and up. So a little bit more challenging, not one of the HF contests, but it's really a fun contest to see how well your signal can get out. Not using repeaters, though. You have to be using simplex for any of these contacts. So a good chance to check out your rigs, check out your antennas, see how well you can perform in that contest.
Could be very interesting if the 6 meter band, 50 megahertz, is open also.
There were a couple interesting stations on just before we were recording the show today on the ham bands. There's a station out of the Seychelles in the Indian Ocean. An amateur call is Sierra 79 Victor Uniform, and he was on 15 meters today. And also a station from Malawi in Africa, 7 Quebec 5 Mike Lima Victor. A British-sounding amateur. His name was Mark, and he was making contacts with Europeans and North Americans. So a couple countries you don't hear very often on the ham bands. You might want to keep your ears open for those stations popping up. Both of them were operating on 15 meter band. They may be operating on other bands as well.
So we are out of time.
Thank you for tuning in today, and every week you can reach us by email if you like, radioreport@yahoo.com. Our show is live streamed and archived at ckut.ca. Our Facebook group, International Radio Report, we invite you to join the group. We're at 979 members. We're still working our way towards that 1,000 mark. So if you listen regularly and check our Facebook group, please join and help us reach that milestone number. And finally, our YouTube channel, you can go to the youtubechannel.com/@IRR to find our International Radio Report show, where you can listen to the program's current and past shows at any time you like. We hope you'll join us next week. Thank you for tuning in today. You've been listening to the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.